The universe has a strict set of rules. The 10 people you're about to meet decided to mark those rules, return to sender. These aren't just stories of bad luck. They're engraved invitations to disaster, RSVP'd with enthusiasm. A friendly legal reminder: watching this video does not make you immune to the laws of physics. 1. The insatiable hunger for online validation, for that perfect viral moment, has become one of the most dangerous driving forces of the modern age. In the beautiful, rolling mountains of North Carolina, a tourist named Derek was not just hiking. He was producing. He saw himself as a content creator, an urban adventurer whose brand was built on authentic, in-the-moment experiences. His hike was a carefully curated performance for his followers. He found his perfect co-star in a clearing off the trail, a large black bear, peacefully foraging for berries. To a rational human, this was a moment for quiet awe and a respectful, wide berth. To Derek, it was a golden opportunity, a collaboration with nature's A-list talent. Ignoring the numerous, explicit signs warning visitors to keep their distance and waving off the concerned shouts of other hikers, he began his approach. His phone was already recording. "All right, guys, you are not going to believe this," he narrated, his voice a practiced blend of casual bravado and manufactured excitement. "We're going to get up close and personal with this absolute unit." The bear, initially indifferent, noticed the approaching figure. It stopped its foraging and, in a classic display of bear body language, stood on its hind legs to get a better look. This is a clear, unambiguous signal in the animal kingdom, a message that translates roughly to, "I am large. I see you. You are entering my personal space. This is your final warning." Derek, fluent only in the language of social media engagement, interpreted this as the bear posing for his camera. "Look at that! He's ready for his close-up. What a legend!" he exclaimed. He continued to close the distance, sidestepping and framing his shot. For the grand finale, the shot that he was sure would break the internet, he turned his back on the 500-pound predator to frame the perfect selfie, one hand holding the phone, the other held up in a triumphant peace sign. This final act of dismissive arrogance was the last straw. The bear, its patience exhausted, dropped to all fours and, with a speed that defied its bulk, closed the remaining distance in a terrifying blur of black fur and primal force. Derek's practiced, camera-ready smile was instantly vaporized, replaced by a mask of cold, stark terror as he turned just in time to face the charge. His phone, his connection to the digital world he so desperately wanted to impress, flew from his hand and landed in the grass, its lens capturing a final, shaky image of an indifferent blue sky. His quest to create content had a very real, very permanent conclusion. He had treated a powerful, wild creature as a prop for his online persona, and nature, in the most brutal way possible, reminded him that it does not care about your follower count. 2. Faith can be a source of great comfort and strength, but when it is corrupted by a toxic dose of impatience and a complete lack of situational awareness, it can lead to a truly bizarre and darkly comedic tragedy. In a crowded, vibrant city in Brazil, a man named Ricardo was attending a special religious service being held on the flat rooftop of a tall church building. Ricardo was a man of profound faith, but his piety was in a constant losing battle with his notoriously short temper. The rooftop was packed, the sun was scorching, and the elderly priest was moving through the dense crowd at a snail's pace, offering individual blessings. Ricardo, stuck near the back, was simmering with righteous frustration. He felt overlooked, his spiritual needs deemed less important than those of the people in front of him. He needed his blessing, and his patience had run out. As the priest, in his long, flowing ceremonial robes, passed by just a few feet from the rooftop's low, decorative stone parapet, Ricardo saw his opportunity. He would not be ignored. He decided to get a personal blessing, to cut the line and force the issue. With the unshakable confidence of a man who believes his intentions are holy, he reached out through the crowd and gave a sharp, insistent tug on the priest's vestments. His goal was simple: get the man's attention. The result was catastrophic. The sudden, unexpected pull on his robe completely destroyed the frail, elderly priest's balance. He stumbled forward, his arms windmilling uselessly, his center of gravity shifting past the point of no return. As the crowd let out a collective gasp of horror, the priest toppled over the low barrier and disappeared from view. For a single, surreal moment, the entire rooftop was frozen in stunned silence, all eyes fixed on the empty space where the priest had just been. All, that is, except for Ricardo. He was the only person not looking over the edge. He was the only person who didn't move. Instead, he was looking up, a triumphant, almost beatific smile on his face. He had done it. He had gotten the priest's attention. He was so completely absorbed in the success of his initial action that he was utterly oblivious to the inevitable, gravitational consequence that was now literally falling upon him. He stood there, a solitary, unmoving island in a sea of panicked onlookers, directly in the flight path of the holy man he had just summoned. The priest, whose blessing Ricardo had so desperately and impatiently craved, descended from the heavens and delivered a final, fatal, and incredibly direct benediction, landing squarely on top of him. The man who was too impatient to wait for his blessing had instead received its special delivery, a grim and darkly ironic lesson in the dangers of trying to get God's attention by yanking on his sleeve. 3. The primal, often idiotic urge to impress a potential mate has been the catalyst for some of the most spectacular failures in human history. At the DC National Zoo on a bright sunny afternoon, a young man named Kyle was on a first date, and it was a certified disaster. He was trying too hard, his jokes were falling flat, and the object of his affection was visibly more interested in her phone. He knew he needed a grand gesture, a bold, undeniable display of masculine bravado that would snatch victory from the jaws of romantic defeat. As they stood in front of the cheetah enclosure, he found his inspiration. The two cheetahs, sleek, powerful engines of muscle and speed, were lounging lazily in the sun, looking deceptively like oversized house cats. In Kyle's ego-addled, desperate mind, a truly terrible idea was born. He saw not a pair of Africa's most efficient predators, but an opportunity. "Watch this," he mumbled, more to himself than to his date, who was already inching away from him. He saw the enclosure's wall, the moat, and the numerous brightly colored signs screaming, "Danger, do not cross barrier," and he interpreted them not as warnings but as props for his stage. He took a running start, and with a surprising burst of adrenaline-fueled athleticism, he leaped over the barrier, cleared the moat, and landed in the grassy habitat. For a glorious, triumphant second, he stood there, chest puffed out, a conquering hero in a kingdom of his own delusion. The cheetahs, who had been in a state of sleepy boredom, were instantly captivated. Their lazy demeanor vanished. In a single, fluid motion, their bodies tensed. They dropped into a low, predatory crouch, and their eyes, pupils dilated, locked onto the strange, clumsy, two-legged creature that had just voluntarily delivered itself to them. The zoo had unwittingly been provided with a surprise, highly interactive enrichment activity for its feline residents. To the cheetahs, Kyle was not a courageous suitor. He was a novel and intriguing stimulus, a living chew toy. The crowd of zoogoers, who had been placidly observing a moment before, erupted in a chorus of gasps and screams, their phones instantly emerging to document the impending carnage. Kyle's triumphant pose dissolved as he finally registered the intense, unblinking professional stare of the two predators, who were now slowly, silently, and expertly beginning to flank him. His grand last-ditch effort to win a girl's affection had instead won him the undivided predatory attention of two of the fastest land animals on the planet. The zoo's emergency response team acted with incredible speed, but not before Kyle received a painful, terrifying, and deeply personal lesson in the vast, unbridgeable gap between a tabby cat and a cheetah. He did not get a second date. 4. The vast, silent, frozen lakes of northern Canada are a haven for ice fishermen, a place of stark beauty and peaceful solitude. But for a fisherman named Dave, this serene landscape was about to become the stage for a desperate, high-stakes battle against his own terrible ideas. After a long, successful day on the ice, he had packed up his gear and climbed into his heavy-duty pickup truck for the long drive back to shore. But the unseasonably warm afternoon sun had softened the top layer of the ice, and the truck's massive tires, instead of gliding over the surface, had sunk just enough to become hopelessly stuck. Every attempt to free the vehicle only made it worse, the spinning tires digging themselves into a deeper, slushier prison. Miles from shore, with no cell signal and the winter sun beginning its rapid descent, a cold, sharp-edged panic began to set in. Dave, a man who prided himself on his rugged self-reliance, scanned his truck for a solution. Tucked away in his toolbox, he found it. A single, forgotten stick of dynamite he kept for removing stubborn tree stumps. In his panicked, frost-addled mind, a plan began to form. A plan of such profound pyrotechnic stupidity, it was almost a work of art. He wasn't going to blow up his truck. His idea was more surgical. He would use the dynamite to create a small, controlled blast to shatter the thick, imprisoning ice around his rear tires, giving them the traction needed to break free. He saw it as a clever, brute-force solution to a frustrating problem. He carefully placed the stick of dynamite on the ice just behind a rear tire, lit the long, slow-burning fuse, and then retreated to what he judged to be a safe distance of about 50 feet to witness his genius. The fuse sizzled, a tiny, ominous serpent of smoke against the vast white canvas. Then, with a deafening, bone-jarring crack that seemed to shake the very air, the dynamite detonated. In one sense, his plan was a spectacular success. A massive geyser of water and ice shards erupted into the sky, and the ice imprisoning his tires was instantly obliterated. The wheels were free. But an explosion is not a precision tool. The powerful, concussive shockwave from the blast didn't just break the ice around his tires, it radiated outwards, sending a web of deep structural fractures through the entire ice sheet for hundreds of feet in every direction. The very ground he and his truck were resting on had been fatally compromised. Before Dave could even begin to celebrate his victory, a low, groaning tectonic rumble began to emanate from beneath his feet. The massive, multi-ton sheet of ice, its integrity shattered, surrendered to the weight it could no longer support. The section of ice holding his truck and the section of ice he was standing on broke free and began a slow, majestic, and completely unstoppable descent into the frigid, black water below. His clever explosive plan to save his truck had instead sealed both their fates, a final, chilling lesson that when you find yourself stuck on thin ice, the absolute last thing you should ever reach for is dynamite. 5. The world of extreme skydiving is populated by individuals who chase a purity of experience, a communion with gravity that borders on the spiritual. Jax was a high priest of this religion, a daredevil and a legend, known for his preternatural skill and his insatiable appetite for pushing the boundaries of what was possible. But the simple, exhilarating act of freefall had become, for him, a bit too predictable. He needed more. He needed a performance, a masterpiece of timing and nerve that would cement his legacy. He devised a new, breathtakingly dangerous stunt, a low-altitude cutaway. The plan was to deploy his main parachute as normal, then, just a few hundred feet from the ground, intentionally detach it and enter a second, heart-stopping freefall, deploying his reserve chute at the absolute last possible second. It was a stunt that left zero room for error, a high-speed conversation with mortality. The day of the stunt, the cameras were rolling for a major sponsorship deal. The pressure was immense, but Jax was in his element. He leaped from the plane at 13,000 feet, a picture of serene focus as he carved through the sky. He deployed his main chute flawlessly and enjoyed the peaceful canopy ride down, the world slowly growing larger beneath him. As his altimeter beeped, signaling his approach to the critical, low-altitude window for the stunt, his focus became diamond-sharp. He was watching the ground rush up to meet him, feeling the wind, living in a world that had shrunk to a few hundred feet of vertical space. He wanted the shot to be perfect, the timing so impossibly close it would make viewers gasp. He let himself get a little lower than he'd practiced, just a little closer to the edge for the sake of the drama. Then, at what he perceived to be the final perfect heart-stopping moment, he pulled the cutaway handle. With a satisfying thwack, his main parachute was released, a colorful bird of nylon flying away on the wind. He was in his second freefall, a brutal, high-speed plummet from just a few hundred feet. This was the moment of glory. but in his intense, artistic focus on the drama of the cutaway, in his desire to make the moment last just a fraction of a second longer, he had made a fatal, irreversible miscalculation of altitude and time. The ground, which had been rushing up at him, was now a solid, unyielding wall. He reached for the handle of his reserve parachute, his hand moving with practiced, desperate speed. But the ground got there first. His meticulously planned, perfectly executed stunt was a masterpiece of timing, but it was a masterpiece with the final, life-saving act edited out. He had so perfectly choreographed the first part of his dance with death that he had left no time at all for the second. A tragic and permanent end to a performance that was, in its own grim way, absolutely flawless. 6. In a dusty, sun-scorched village in India, a man named Kumar, while clearing a pile of old clay pots from his property, made a discovery that sent a jolt of superstitious terror and divine excitement through him. Trapped inside one of the large, narrow-necked pots was a highly venomous, spectacled cobra, a creature both feared for its lethal bite and revered in local culture as a symbol of divine power. The snake, unable to navigate the pot's smooth, curved interior, was a prisoner. A person guided by a modern, rational worldview would have seen a dangerous animal in need of professional removal. Kumar, however, a man whose life was governed by ancient beliefs and omens, saw something else entirely. He saw a sacred test, a divine messenger sent to him by the god Shiva himself. He became consumed by the belief that if he, a humble and devout man, were to personally free the trapped deity, he would be granted a powerful, life-altering blessing, good fortune, robust health, and spiritual enlightenment. His family, seeing the situation for what it was, a man about to stick his hand into a container with a deadly snake, pleaded and begged him to leave it alone, to call the village snake charmer. But Kumar's faith was absolute. He saw their fear as a lack of piety. This was his moment, his personal audience with a god. He decided that simply tipping the pot over and letting the snake slide out would be an insult, a disrespectful and unceremonious way to treat a divine being. The liberation required a sacred ritual. He spent the next hour performing an elaborate ceremony in front of the clay pot, chanting mantras, lighting sticks of incense whose smoke curled into the still air, and making offerings of milk and marigold flowers. He was consecrating the ground, purifying himself, and, he believed, communicating his peaceful and reverent intentions to the trapped cobra. The cobra, meanwhile, coiled in the dark, suffocating heat of the pot, was growing increasingly agitated and terrified by the strange vibrations and smells. When Kumar's ritual was complete, he felt a serene calm wash over him. He was ready. He had earned the snake's divine trust. With a beatific smile, he knelt before the pot, took a deep, meditative breath, and slowly, deliberately, reached his bare hand into the pot's dark, narrow opening to gently lift the god to freedom. The cobra, a creature of pure, primal instinct, cornered and terrified, did what millions of years of evolution had programmed it to do when a large, warm, unknown object invaded its tiny, dark space. It struck. With a speed that was faster than human thought, it delivered a full, unadulterated, and massively envenomated bite. Kumar recoiled with a cry of shocked disbelief, two small, neat puncture marks already swelling on his hand. The divine blessing he had so confidently and piously anticipated had instead been delivered in the form of a potent, fast-acting neurotoxin. He had approached a deadly, terrified animal with a heart full of unwavering faith, but a mind utterly devoid of basic caution, a fatal combination that proved some blessings are best left unreceived. 7. In the world of unsanctioned, testosterone-fueled competitions, there are few events as brutally simple as a slapping contest. The rules are primal. Two individuals stand face-to-face and take turns delivering a full-force, open-handed slap to their opponent's cheek. The goal is to either knock your opponent out or force them to quit. It's a contest of raw power and, more importantly, the ability to absorb catastrophic punishment. In a dimly lit, crowded warehouse on the outskirts of Moscow, one such contest was reaching its brutal climax. Our protagonist, a massive man named Vasily, a local legend known for his iron jaw and hands like dinner plates, was in the final round. He and his equally formidable opponent had been trading thunderous blows for what felt like an eternity, each slap echoing through the warehouse like a gunshot. The crowd was roaring, the energy a potent cocktail of cheap vodka and primal bloodlust. Vasily was taking a beating, his face a swollen purple mask, but his spirit was unbreakable. He absorbed a particularly vicious slap that sent a spray of sweat flying, staggered for a moment, and then just grinned, a bloody, defiant smile. It was his turn. He drew back his arm, channeling every last ounce of his strength into one final, decisive blow. He swung, and the impact was colossal. His opponent's head snapped to the side, his eyes rolled back, and he crumpled to the floor unconscious. Vasily had won. The crowd erupted, lifting him onto their shoulders, chanting his name. He was the champion, the king of the slap, a titan of toughness. He raised his arms in victory, a triumphant, bloody warrior basking in the glory of his hard-won title. But as he celebrated, a silent, invisible, and catastrophic event was unfolding inside his skull. The repeated high-impact trauma of the slaps, blow after concussive blow, had done more than just cause bruising. It had ruptured a blood vessel deep within his brain. As his friends carried him around the room, a massive brain hemorrhage was rapidly filling his cranium, compressing his brain tissue with incredible, fatal pressure. His triumphant smile faltered. A look of confusion washed over his face. He mumbled something. Then his eyes went vacant, and he collapsed, a dead weight in his friend's arms. The celebration came to a screeching, horrified halt. He had won the contest, proving his ability to endure more punishment than any other man in the room. But the very punishment he had so stoically absorbed had delivered a fatal knockout blow just moments after his victory was declared. He had won the battle, but lost the war in the most permanent way possible. 8. The world of terrorism is often portrayed as a realm of cold, calculating, and ruthlessly efficient operatives. This story, however, is a stark reminder that it is sometimes populated by individuals whose incompetence is as profound as their ideology. A small, radical cell had spent months planning a car bomb attack in a bustling city center. They had built the device, a powerful, if crudely constructed, explosive packed into the trunk of a stolen sedan. The final, critical task fell to a young, eager operative named Omar, setting the timer. On the morning of the planned attack, Omar sat in the car, the bomb just a few feet behind him, and began the delicate process. He was nervous, his hands trembling slightly. His instructions were to set the timer for a 1-hour countdown, giving him just enough time to drive the vehicle to its target, park it, and walk away. He carefully set the digital timer to 60 minutes. What Omar, in his nervous haste, had completely and utterly failed to account for was a simple, mundane, and entirely public piece of information. Daylight saving time had ended the previous night. At 2 a.m., all the clocks in the country had been set back 1 hour. But the clock on the bomb's timer, an isolated digital device, had not automatically updated. When Omar set the timer for what he thought was 9:01 a.m., the bomb's internal clock registered it as 8 a.m. He had not set a 60-minute timer. He had set a 120-minute timer. Confident in his work, he started the car and began his journey. He drove through the city, a man on a deadly mission, completely oblivious to the fact that his own incompetence had just doubled his travel time. He probably felt a surge of pride, of purpose. He was a soldier, a martyr. He was also, at that moment, driving his own coffin. An hour later, as he was navigating a congested highway on the outskirts of the city, still a good 20 minutes from his target, the bomb's timer, which had been patiently and accurately counting down from its 2-hour setting, reached 0. The detonation was massive, a catastrophic explosion that vaporized the car and everything in it, creating a scene of chaos and destruction on a highway far from the intended target. The man who was tasked with delivering a message of terror had instead become the sole and very ironic victim of his own device. He had been, in the most literal sense, hoisted by his own petard, a final, explosive testament to the importance of always remembering to check the clock. 9. In the hallowed, experimental kitchens of the molecular gastronomy world, A brilliant but notoriously impatient French chef named Antoine was pushing the boundaries of culinary science. He was a pioneer, a man who saw food not just as ingredients, but as a collection of textures, temperatures, and chemical reactions waiting to be manipulated. His latest obsession was creating the deconstructed fried chicken, a dish that would capture the essence of the classic comfort food in a shocking avant-garde form. A key component of his creation involved flash frying the chicken in a vat of liquid nitrogen. The 196 excess liquid would instantly cook the outside to a hyper-crispy state while leaving the inside perfectly moist. It was a difficult and incredibly dangerous technique. Standard safety protocols for handling liquid nitrogen are strict and non-negotiable. Insulated cryogenic gloves, safety goggles, and the use of tongs at all times. But Antoine, a culinary artist who viewed safety protocols as an annoying constraint on his creative flow, often ignored them. One frantic evening during a busy dinner service, he was working with the vat of bubbling, smoking liquid nitrogen. He submerged a piece of chicken, but it wasn't positioned correctly. Impatient, and with an order on the line, he didn't bother to reach for the tongs. He was going to make a quick adjustment. In a move of breathtaking recklessness, he plunged his bare hand directly into the vat of cryogenic liquid. The effect was instantaneous and horrific. It wasn't a cold burn. It was a complete solid-state transformation. The extreme cold flash froze his hand solid in a fraction of a second, the moisture in his tissues crystallizing instantly. He pulled his hand out, a perfect, pale, frozen replica of his own hand, now as brittle as glass. The shock and a wave of unimaginable, delayed pain hit him. He stumbled backward in a state of pure, agonized disbelief, knocking over the large, unsealed dewar of liquid nitrogen. The cryogenic liquid spilled across the floor of his small, enclosed kitchen and instantly began to vaporize, turning into a massive, invisible cloud of nitrogen gas. A single liter of liquid nitrogen expands to almost 700 liters of gas, and it is heavier than air. The cloud of nitrogen rapidly and silently displaced all of the oxygen in the small, poorly ventilated kitchen. Antoine, already in a state of shock from his shattered, frozen hand, took a breath and found no air, only inert, suffocating nitrogen. He collapsed, a victim not just of the cryogenic burn, but of the very substance he had tried to master. His quest for culinary perfection had ended in a bizarre, multi-stage and fatal kitchen accident. 10. In the ever-escalating arms race for online notoriety, a viral internet challenge known as the Tide Pod Challenge emerged as a particularly baffling and dangerous phenomenon. The challenge was simple: to film oneself biting into and consuming a brightly colored liquid laundry detergent packet. To any rational mind, the idea of eating a concentrated toxic chemical detergent is self-evidently insane. But in the world of viral trends, logic often takes a backseat to the pursuit of likes, shares, and fleeting internet fame. A young man, a teenager we'll call Jake, decided it was his turn to chase this particular brand of clout. He saw the videos, he saw the attention they were getting, and he wanted in. He set up his phone in his bathroom, a single glistening red and blue Tide Pod held between his thumb and forefinger like a forbidden fruit. He was probably nervous, but the allure of potential virality was stronger than his instinct for self-preservation. With a "What's up, guys?" and a nervous grin for the camera, he popped the pod into his mouth and bit down. The thin, water-soluble membrane instantly dissolved, releasing a torrent of concentrated, industrial-strength detergent into his mouth and down his throat. The chemical assault was immediate and catastrophic. The highly alkaline detergent began to cause severe, caustic burns to the soft, delicate tissues of his mouth, esophagus, and stomach. But the most devastating effect was on his lungs. As he gagged and choked on the thick, soapy liquid, he inevitably inhaled some of it into his respiratory tract. The detergent, a substance designed to break down grease and organic matter, began to do its job with brutal efficiency on the delicate lining of his lungs, triggering a massive inflammatory response and acute respiratory failure. The very chemicals designed to get tough stains out of his clothes were now working on getting the life out of his insides. He had wanted to go viral. He had wanted to be part of the trend. But the price of his 15 seconds of internet fame was a brutal, agonizing, and very permanent cleansing from the inside out. He had treated a packet of toxic chemicals like a piece of candy, a final, fatal act of submission to the dumbest of online dares. All right, new challenge for the comments. You've just been made the editor of the Darwin Awards. Your first task is to write a one-sentence, brutally honest obituary for your favorite winner from tonight's video. If you enjoyed this celebration of poor life choices, hit like and subscribe for more.